Little girl thrown out for taking a spoon of milk. Suddenly, a millionaire stepped in, and Pasadena's summer air shimmered like broken glass, pressing heat into the skin until it stung. On the edge of a cracked driveway, Lily Harper, just 8 years old, stood trembling with her twin brothers clutched to her chest. The baby's cries scraped the silence, feverish bodies burning against her thin arms. A half-empty bottle dangled from her hand, drops of milk sliding down the plastic like wasted diamonds. The screen door behind her banged open, and Robert's voice thundered, "Get out. No thief lives under my roof." Vivian's laugh followed like poison. One spoonful of milk, that was all it took to make them throw her onto the blistering street, as if she were nothing. Neighbors peeked from shaded windows, but curtains fell faster than sympathy. A dog barked. Sprinklers hissed on perfect lawns across the road, water arcing where her brothers would never taste it. Lily's bare feet blistered on the pavement, her eyes stinging with a mix of tears and sweat. She whispered, "Please, just a little more," but no one listened. Then, like the world itself pausing, a deep hum filled the street. A black Rolls-Royce slid to the curb, sunlight flashing across chrome. The door opened in silence. Out stepped a silver-haired man with eyes carved from sorrow and steel, a presence that bent the air around him. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't look at Robert or Vivian sneering from the porch. His gaze locked only on the shaking child and her starving brothers. He took one slow breath, then spoke a single sentence, soft but sharp enough to cut through the heat, the shame, the cruelty. That sentence would rip apart everything Lily thought she knew, and it would turn a forgotten girl into the center of a story no one could have imagined. His one sentence changed everything. What did he say? Lily Harper had learned to make herself small in a house that was never hers. The Pasadena home where she lived with her Uncle Robert Klein and his wife Vivian Holt carried the smell of lemon polish and stale anger. The curtains stayed half-drawn to keep out the beating sun, and the cupboard stayed half-empty because food was counted like treasure. At 8 years old, she understood rations. She understood silence. She understood that asking for more brought consequences. Noah and Levi, the twins in her care, whimpered through most nights. Their tiny bodies burned with fever, and their ribs showed through their skin like delicate wires. She sang them lullabies, her mother once whispered, though her own voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the twisted metal of the car that had taken her parents away, the whispers of sabotage still echoing, though she was too young to piece it together. Robert had stood at the funeral with his jaw tight. Vivian with sunglasses hiding her dry eyes, and within weeks they had claimed guardianship and the inheritance that should have belonged to the children. Robert's footsteps on the hardwood floor were enough to make Lily's stomach knot. He moved like a man who enjoyed being overheard, his shoes striking with authority, his belt never far from reach. Vivian's presence was quieter but sharper, words laced with venom that cut deeper than Robert's shouts. "Ungrateful little burden," she muttered as she passed Lily, dusting the mantel. The girl bit her lip until it bled and kept polishing. There were rules in the house: chores before meals, silence at the table, and never more than what was given. Milk was measured in ounces, bread in slices, kindness in none. That afternoon, the sun blistered through the window panes, and the twins coughed in their crib, red-faced and restless. Lily opened the refrigerator and stared at the near-empty shelf. A bottle of milk, sweating in the heat, sat waiting for the next strict allotment. She reached for it, heart pounding. The twins needed it more than the rules demanded. She poured a spoonful carefully, steadying her hand so not a drop spilled, and tipped it into a cracked bottle. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. She turned, thinking she had escaped notice, when a shadow darkened the doorway. Robert's face hardened instantly. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice rattled the plates. Vivian appeared behind him, arms folded, a slow smile tugging her lip. Lily clutched the bottle to her chest. "They're sick. Just a little more will help." Her voice was small, brittle but desperate. Robert lunged forward, snatching the bottle from her hand so roughly that milk splattered across the counter. He shoved her back, the chair legs screeching as she stumbled. Vivian's laughter hissed. "Thief, just like your mother, always taking what isn't hers." The words cut like knives. Before Lily could defend herself, Robert grabbed her thin arm and dragged her toward the door. The twins shrieked in their crib, high-pitched wails that echoed through the suffocating house. Vivian tossed a ragged diaper bag at Lily's feet as Robert shoved her onto the scorching pavement outside. The heat slapped her skin, the ground burning her bare feet. Lily stumbled but caught herself, arms wrapping around Noah and Levi, who cried as if the world itself had betrayed them. She turned back to the closed door, her uncle's voice muffled but cruel even from behind the wood. "Stay out. You'll get nothing more here." The screen clattered shut, the lock sliding into place, final and cold. She stood there on the sidewalk, Pasadena's neat suburban streets stretching in both directions. Lawns were trimmed, though the grass browned in the relentless sun. A neighbor watering his roses paused to look, then turned away quickly, the hose dribbling at his shoes. Another woman across the street peeked through her blinds and shook her head before disappearing. The world moved on while Lily's world crumbled. Sweat trickled down her temples, tears mixing as she whispered to the twins, "I'll take care of you. I promise." Blocks away, James Whitaker steered his Rolls-Royce slowly down the sun-beaten road. He had just left the cemetery where white lilies wilted in a vase beside his wife's headstone. The drive home always felt heavier on these days, silence pressing harder than the car's leather seats. At 62, he carried loss like a permanent weight on his shoulders, though he hid it beneath tailored suits and a name that still held power in the world of technology. His twin sons, Evan and Caleb, had urged him not to go alone, but grief was a companion he no longer argued with. As the car approached Lily's street, James noticed the scene like a painting too stark to ignore. A girl no older than his grandniece, barefoot on blistering pavement, clutching two screaming infants, while a couple watched from the porch with smug detachment. His driver slowed instinctively, but James lifted a hand. "Stop here." His voice carried calm authority. He opened the door and felt the wave of heat as he stepped out, jacket already in his hand. Lily's eyes widened at the sight of the car, the polished chrome reflecting her small, desperate figure. She tightened her grip on the twins as if the world might try to take them too. Robert sneered from the porch, muttering something under his breath, while Vivian's smirk deepened. James ignored them completely. His gaze settled on the girl, trembling but defiant even in her fear. Something in her eyes reminded him of nights long ago when his wife had soothed their own children through sickness, her calm anchoring him in storm. He crouched slowly, careful not to startle her, and laid his jacket gently over the babies. Lily flinched but didn't move away. Her breath came in uneven bursts. Her lips cracked from heat, yet she lifted her chin as if daring the world to test her resolve again. James saw more than desperation. He saw resilience born too young. For a moment, grief and purpose collided in his chest. He knew without fully knowing that this moment was not a chance. It was a decision, the kind that would not wait, the kind that rewrote life. The sun pressed down harder as the afternoon dragged, and Lily's bare feet burned with every hesitant step she took along the cracked sidewalk. She carried Noah and Levi in her trembling arms, their feverish whimpers muffled against her thin shoulder. Her eyes darted from door to door, desperate for mercy, desperate for anyone to notice. The first house she reached had a polished red door and the smell of fresh paint. She knocked softly, then harder, whispering through the wood, "Please, just a little milk, my brothers are sick." The sound of footsteps approached, the latch rattled, and a woman in her 40s opened only a sliver. She frowned as if Lily's presence were an intrusion. Her eyes flicked to the babies, then to the sweat-soaked girl, and with a sharp shake of her head, she closed the door again. The click of the lock echoed louder than words. Lily's throat tightened, but she forced her legs to move toward the next house. The second door opened wider, revealing an elderly man with glasses perched low on his nose. His expression softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened when he glanced past Lily to Robert and Vivian standing smugly on their porch across the street. Robert gave a lazy wave as if to warn him off. The man sighed and muttered, "I can't get involved," before shutting the door slowly, his eyes filled with something that looked like regret but offered no help. Lily felt her knees weaken. The babies cried louder, Noah's tiny fists pounding against her collarbone. She whispered to them, promising she would not give up. She tried again, knocking on another neighbor's house where laughter spilled from an open window. The curtains twitched, and a young woman peeked out. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Lily's brimming with desperation, the woman's uncertain. Then the blinds snapped shut. The laughter inside continued, drowning out the soft sob that escaped Lily's lips. Her throat felt raw from pleading, her body drenched in heat, but still she moved, determined that someone had to care. Across the street, Robert leaned against the railing with a cigarette dangling from his mouth. His voice carried, sharp and cruel, "Look at her, begging like a stray dog. Maybe she'll learn now that stealing has consequences." Vivian stood beside him, her manicured nails glinting in the sun, as she clapped slowly. "Pathetic child," she called. "Go on, Lily, knock on every door. See if anyone wants a thief in their yard." She lifted the diaper bag in her hand and tossed it across the lawn. It landed in the dirt with a dull thud, bottles rattling inside, a cruel performance of disdain. Lily's vision blurred with tears as she bent to pick it up, clutching the worn strap against her chest. She could barely breathe through the humiliation, but she pressed her lips together and forced herself to keep standing. The babies cried harder, sweat glistening on their foreheads. She whispered, "I'll find help. I won't let them hurt you again." The purr of the Rolls-Royce engine broke the moment. James Whittaker stepped out once more, his silver hair gleaming against the harsh sun. He walked with unhurried purpose, each step calm but firm, his presence commanding attention. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as he crossed the pavement toward Lily. He crouched to her level, the leather of his jacket brushing against her arms, as he gently draped it over the children. The weight of it shielded them from the sun, a small act but one that felt monumental. Lily's wide eyes flicked up to meet his. She expected scolding, another rejection, but instead she saw compassion, etched into the lines of his face. Robert scoffed from the porch. "Who do you think you are, interfering in family business?" His words dripped with disdain. Vivian added with a smirk, "She's ours to deal with. She belongs here, not with strangers who think money gives them rights." James didn't even glance their way. His calm, steady gaze stayed fixed on Lily. His voice, low but resolute, carried enough weight to silence the jeer. "No child belongs on a street like this. No infant should cry from hunger, while neighbors turn their backs." Lily's breath hitched, her small fingers tightening on the edge of his sleeve, as if she dared to believe he meant it. James shifted, turning his head toward Robert and Vivian at last. His tone did not rise, yet the authority in it was undeniable. "You call yourself guardians, yet you discard children as if they're refuse. Is this how you honor their parents' memory?" Robert bristled, his face red, while Vivian muttered something sharp under her breath. But neither stepped forward, nor denied what was plain. The neighbors who had closed their doors now peeked again through the curtains. Some looked uneasy, others ashamed, but still no one spoke. The silence itself accused. Lily clutched Noah closer, tears streaking her cheeks, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. James placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her, grounding her, his touch carrying reassurance that she had not felt in years. Vivian's sharp voice cut the silence. "Take your hands off her. You don't know what you're meddling with. She's family, and we decide what's best." James's jaw tightened slightly, though his voice remained calm. "What's best is not cruelty. What's best is not hunger. What's best is not leaving an 8-year-old to beg in the heat while you sneer from comfort. I will not stand by and let it continue." Robert stomped his cigarette into the ground, his temper boiling. "You think you can waltz in here with your expensive car and your suits, and tell us how to handle what's ours? You have no right." James's eyes hardened, his grief simmering beneath the surface, but channeled into strength. "I have every right when human decency is abandoned. You see an inheritance. I see children. That is the difference." The weight of his words hung in the air. Lily's chest heaved as she tried to steady her brothers, her heart caught between terror and a yearning she barely dared to name. For the first time since she could remember, someone had stood for her, not against her. Someone had spoken not as if she were a nuisance, but as if she mattered. The babies settled slightly under the shelter of James's jacket, their cries softening. Lily brushed her cheek against their damp hair, whispering, "It's going to be okay." She wanted to believe it, even as Robert cursed and Vivian hissed insults under her breath. James stood taller now, his presence casting a shadow over their malice. His calm authority shifted the balance, making Robert and Vivian's cruelty look smaller, weaker in the sunlight of his conviction. "Have you ever seen someone turn away from a child in need? What small step could you take to help?" The question lingered like a whisper, not just in the scene but in the hearts of anyone who witnessed it. For Lily, the answer stood before her, silver hair gleaming, voice steady, presence unshakable. For Robert and Vivian, it was a threat they could not ignore. And for the silent neighbors, it was a mirror showing them what they had failed to do. The moment had changed. The tension still burned, but hope had finally found its way onto the street. The Rolls-Royce's polished frame shimmered against the Pasadena sun, as James stood firmly before Lily, the quiet defiance in his eyes, silencing Robert's last insult. He bent slightly, his tone softened but resolute. "Come with me," he said. For Lily, the words felt both like salvation and a storm. She froze, heart pounding, glancing at the porch where Vivian smirked, daring her to move. Robert barked a laugh. "Go ahead, girl. See how long before he tosses you out, too." But the contempt behind their voices no longer outweighed the strange warmth radiating from the silver-haired stranger. His hand extended, steady, patient. Lily hesitated, then shifted Noah higher against her chest and stepped closer. James lifted the diaper bag from the dirt, slung it over his shoulder without a trace of disgust, and guided her toward the car. The leather door opened with a hush. Lily slid inside slowly, clutching the twins tighter, as if safety might vanish the second she released them. Evan and Caleb sat waiting, their arms crossed, their matching faces etched with disbelief. Evan leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Father, what is this? You can't just bring strangers into our car." Caleb added, "It's reckless. We don't know who she is." Their protests filled the air like static, but James raised a hand. "Nuff, look at her. Look at them. You think I can drive past and pretend this didn't happen?" His sons exchanged uneasy glances, but James's authority was not one to be challenged lightly. He closed the door with a gentle push and settled into the seat across from Lily. The car pulled away, rolling down the sun-baked street, while Robert and Vivian's figures shrank in the rear window. Lily's breath came fast and shallow, her eyes darting between the men around her. The plush interior felt alien, its smooth leather and faint scent of cedar, unlike anything she had known. She pressed her cheek against Noah's hot forehead, whispering comfort into his hair. Though her voice trembled, Levi shifted weakly in her lap, his tiny cry like a plea Lily could not answer. James watched in silence, grief tugging at him with every sound the infants made. For a moment, he saw flashes of nights long past, his wife cradling their own children, her gentle smile steadying him. The ache in his chest sharpened, but it steeled his resolve. Evan muttered, "This isn't our problem." James turned to him, his voice quiet but unyielding. "Compassion is always our problem. If we have the means to act, we don't get to walk away." Caleb looked out the window, jaw tight, but said nothing. Lily glanced at them nervously, her fingers gripping Noah's blanket, unsure whether to trust the words she'd heard or brace for more cruelty. She wanted to believe this man was different, but hope was dangerous. The Rolls-Royce slowed near a corner store with faded paint and flickering neon lights. James tapped the driver's shoulder. "Pull over." He stepped out, gesturing for Lily to follow. She hesitated before sliding carefully out, holding both babies close as if she feared they might be taken. Inside, the store's cool air wrapped around her like relief. Shelves towered with goods she rarely saw, rows of diapers, tins of formula, medicines she couldn't name. Her breath caught, overwhelmed by the abundance. James moved with quiet purpose, filling a basket with formula, bottles, fever medicine, fresh diapers, and wipes. He handed the basket to Evan, who carried it with a reluctant sigh. Caleb trailed behind, still silent, his expression unreadable. At the counter, the cashier raised an eyebrow at the sight of the disheveled girl, clutching two babies, and the wealthy man stacking supplies. James's card slid smoothly across the machine. No hesitation, no calculation. To him, there was no price to weigh against human need. Lily whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you," her voice breaking as if unused to gratitude being accepted. She looked down quickly, cheeks flushing, afraid to meet his eyes. James crouched slightly to her level again. "You don't need to thank me, just let them get better." They stepped outside again, the sun still heavy, but less cruel now that Lily carried bags of care instead of empty hands. She loaded the diapers and formula into the worn bag Robert had thrown at her, the contrast striking. Cruelty had cast her out, yet kindness had placed more in her arms than she had dared imagine. She clutched Noah tighter, fear and gratitude warring inside her. Trusting strangers had never been safe. Every instinct told her that safety came only from herself. Yet here was this man, a stranger who had intervened when everyone else had turned away. The ride continued in silence for a while. The twins settled slightly, soothed by the cool interior and the soft rattle of bottles now resting in Lily's lap. Her eyes kept flicking toward James, trying to decipher his intentions. Why would a man like him stop for a girl like her? She pressed her forehead against the window, the Pasadena streets blurring by, still carrying the sting of rejection. Her mind replayed the slammed doors, the neighbors who looked and then turned away, the porch where Robert and Vivian still stood sneering. The memory tightened her chest, but then she felt the weight of James's jacket draped still over her brothers, shielding them. It was more than fabric, it was protection she had not known in years. Evan finally spoke, softer now. "Father, you can't take this on. It's too much." James replied calmly. "What's too much is watching a child beg and pretending you didn't see. What's too much is silence, when you have the power to change it." Caleb's gaze softened slightly as he watched Lily adjust the blanket around Lee. Something in her quiet determination tugged at him, though he said nothing. Lily lowered her head, whispering into Noah's hair, "We'll be okay now." But even as she said it, doubt lingered. She had been promised safety before, and it had shattered. Her trust was a fragile thing, stitched together with fear. Still, for the first time, She felt a possibility she had almost forgotten. Maybe not everyone was like Robert and Vivian. Maybe kindness still existed in the world. The car turned onto a quieter road, trees arching overhead, shade falling across the glass. James leaned back, his eyes on Lily and the twins, his mind a storm of memory and decision. His wife had always believed in small acts of kindness, the kind that rippled outward unseen. Her voice echoed in him now, urging him forward. This was not chance, it was choice. When has a stranger's kindness surprised you? Could you be that light for someone today? The question lingered, not spoken aloud but resonating in the silence of the car. For James, the answer had already been given the moment he stopped. For Lily, it was still unfolding, fragile and uncertain. For the twins, it was survival cradled in arms, steadied by hope. The Rolls-Royce moved onward, carrying them away from cruelty, carrying them towards something unformed, but brighter than the heat-soaked streets they had left behind. James's penthouse overlooked the sprawl of Pasadena. Glass walls capturing the city's glow as evening settled in. The polished marble floors reflected soft light, the hum of the air conditioning replacing the heat-soaked silence Lily had grown used to. She sat curled on the edge of a cream sofa, Noah asleep against her chest while Levi shifted restlessly in her lap. The sheer size of the space left her uneasy. She clutched the twins tightly, afraid that if she loosened her hold, the safety she had stumbled into might vanish. The refrigerator's hum and the faint ticking of a wall clock sounded louder than comfort. She kept glancing toward the door, half expecting Robert's voice to crash through. Evan and Caleb stood across the room, their arms folded, their stance defensive. Evan's frustration surfaced first. "Father, this is madness. You don't even know them. 2 infants and a child in this house. It's chaos waiting to happen." Caleb added, quieter but firm. "They're not our responsibility. You can't fix every broken story you pass on the street." Their words cut across the stillness, sharp with disbelief. James remained calm, his back straight as he poured a glass of water. He turned, voice measured. "They are children in need. That alone makes them my responsibility for now." Lily's ears burned. She tucked Levi closer, shielding him from words he couldn't understand but somehow felt. She whispered a lullaby under her breath, the one her mother used to sing, hoping to drown out the sting. Evan's voice rose. "It's a burden, Father, a burden that doesn't belong to us." James set the glass down firmly, the sound ringing. "Burden?" he repeated, his tone steady but edged with quiet steel. "They are not a burden. They are survivors of cruelty. And if I walk away, I become no better than those who discarded them." Caleb shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Lily's small frame hunched protectively over the twins. For a moment guilt flickered in his eyes, but he masked it quickly. Upstairs, Lily was later shown a guest room, its white sheets crisp, its window offering a view of glittering city light. She placed the twins carefully on the bed, tucking them into a blanket. The room smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, foreign but safe. Yet the voices from downstairs carried upward, muffled but distinct enough to twist her stomach. She crept to the landing, clutching the railing, straining to listen. Robert's name hissed through the phone on the kitchen counter. Vivian's sharper tone followed, their anger dripping through the speaker. "She's supposed to be under our roof, Robert," Vivian snapped. "If he keeps them, the money slips further out of reach." Robert growled, "We'll handle it. I'm contacting Leonard Price tomorrow. He knows how to twist the law." Vivian's laugh was cold. "Good, let Whitaker think he's playing savior. We'll have them back soon, and when we do, the inheritance will be ours again." Lily's heart pounded so hard she pressed Levi against her to quiet the sound. Her breath hitched as the edges of their plans sank in. A lawyer, a fight she couldn't begin to understand but knew meant danger. She backed away carefully, legs trembling, and returned to the room where Noah stirred softly. She sat on the floor beside the bed, her arms wrapping around Levi, rocking him gently while silent tears streaked her cheeks. Safety was an illusion. Robert and Vivian would not let her go so easily. Downstairs, James ended the call that had confirmed his suspicions. Leonard Price was a name he knew, a man infamous in Pasadena's legal world for twisting truth into shadow, for selling justice to the highest bidder. James's jaw tightened. He leaned against the counter, staring out at the skyline, the city lights blinking, indifferent to the battles inside human hearts. Evan spoke again, quieter this time. "You can't shield them forever, Father. If these people have rights, if the law bends their way, what then?" James turned slowly, his gaze steady. "Then we fight, with truth, with evidence, with whatever it takes." In the guest room, Lily's mind replayed every cruel laugh, every slammed door, every night of hunger. She wanted to believe James's words earlier in the car, wanted to trust that this man who had stepped in would not walk away. Yet doubt clawed at her. Adults had promised before. Promises had shattered before. She kissed Levi's damp forehead, whispering, "I'll protect you, no matter what." Her own voice shook because she didn't know how. Later, James climbed the stairs, pausing at the doorway to see Lily huddled on the carpet, her back against the bed, both infants pressed to her chest. Her eyes were wide, red from tears, but defiant. He stepped carefully into the room, crouched to her level, his tone gentler than before. "You overheard, didn't you?" She nodded silently, clutching the babies tighter. He didn't ask her to let go, didn't promise empty assurances. Instead, he said, "You are safe here. They may try, but I will not let them win. You have my word." Lily searched his face, looking for cracks, for deceit, but found only grief-hardened sincerity. She wanted to trust, but the weight of betrayal made her cautious. James reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo. He handed it to her. In it, a smiling woman cradled two boys, Evan and Caleb, as children. "My wife believed kindness was strength. She taught me that no matter how much power or wealth you hold, if you don't use it to protect the vulnerable, it means nothing. I lost her, but I will not lose the meaning she gave me." Lily traced the edges of the photo with trembling fingers. For the first time, she saw not just a stranger, but someone broken in ways that echoed her own fractures. Still, fear lingered. Could kindness truly last? Could safety hold against cruelty backed by money and lies? She laid the photo gently on the nightstand, her whisper almost inaudible. "Have you ever doubted someone's intentions? What does it take to rebuild trust?" The question was not aimed at him, not fully, but it hung between them, a fragile thread. James didn't answer directly. He simply reached forward, adjusting the blanket around Levi with care, his touch steady, his presence unwavering. Sometimes trust was rebuilt, not with words but with actions repeated, until doubt lost its grip. Lily watched him, uncertain but no longer entirely afraid. Down in the city, Robert and Vivian sat across from Leonard Price in his dim office, the smell of stale coffee and tobacco clinging to the air. Leonard leaned back in his chair, his smile thin and calculating. "Custody battles are never about children," he drawled. "They're about power. If Whitaker thinks his reputation gives him an edge, he's mistaken. I can paint him as reckless, manipulative, unfit." Vivian's eyes gleamed. Robert nodded, fists clenched. "Do it. Tear him apart if you have to. The kids come back to us, and with them, the money." Leonard scribbled notes, already plotting strategies, already twisting truth into weapon. As night deepened, Lily finally drifted into restless sleep, one arm draped protectively over Noah and Levi. James remained at the doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, knowing the storm ahead would test them all. Evan and Caleb lingered in the hall, their skepticism tempered by unease. Caleb whispered, "What if they're right? What if we can't win?" James's reply was quiet but steady. "Then we fight anyway, because walking away is not an option." The penthouse lights dimmed, but beneath the calm surface, tension simmered. In one room, a child battled fear with fragile hope. In another, a father prepared for war against greed sharpened by law. And beyond those walls, enemies gathered, plotting to reclaim what cruelty believed it owned. The stage was set for conflict, and trust hung by a thread, waiting to be tested. Detective Sarah Navarro had spent 20 years tracing the edges of truth hidden beneath polished lies, but the file spread across her desk that night made her chest tighten. The photograph showed a mangled sedan twisted around the guardrail of a Pasadena highway, its frame warped beyond recognition. The official report had called it a tragic accident, brake failure, and no foul play was suspected. Yet the evidence she now studied told a darker story. Close-up shots revealed deep grooves on the brake line, marks too precise to be wear and tear. Someone had cut them. Her pen tapped against the desk as she replayed the timeline. The crash that killed Daniel and Claire Harper, 6 months earlier. The swift petition for guardianship by Robert Klein and Vivian Holt. The inheritance folded neatly into their control. It all fit too well, like pieces sliding into place in a puzzle designed by greed. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the names highlighted in her notes. Robert Klein, Vivian Holt. Motive clear, opportunity present, and silence maintained until now. Sarah felt the old fire burn in her chest, the one that had driven her through cases where justice seemed impossible. She closed the file and stood, the weight of truth pressing against her shoulders. The children had been left in the hands of those who might have orchestrated their parents' deaths. That was no coincidence. That was a crime demanding exposure. The following morning, James Whitaker sat in his study. The city spread like glass and steel behind him. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, exhaustion lining his features. The night had been long, filled with Lily's restless cries and the twins' fevered whimpers. Yet when Detective Navarro entered, her presence carried an urgency that cut through fatigue. She placed the file on his desk and slid it toward him. "You need to see this," she said, her voice steady but laced with gravity. James opened the folder slowly, his eyes scanning the photographs, the highlighted notes, the technical breakdown of tampered brake. His hand tightened on the page, jaw set. He glanced up, voice low but resolute. "You're saying it wasn't an accident?" Navarro nodded. "It was sabotage. And the evidence points directly to Robert and Vivian. They had everything to gain and no alibi strong enough to shield them. I can't move forward officially without more corroboration, but this is the start." James's chest ached with fury. He pictured Lily, barefoot in the street, clutching her brothers, tossed aside by the very people who might have stolen her parent. Rage simmered beneath his grief that had once felt bottomless but now transformed into fuel. "Then we won't let them near her again," he said firmly. "They wanted control. They will have nothing." Upstairs, Lily sat cross-legged on the bed, Noah resting against her lap, while Levi slept curled beside her. She hummed softly, her voice fragile but filled with aching memory. The lullaby was one her mother had sung when storms rattled the windows of their old home. A gentle tune of safety and love. Lily's throat caught on the words, tears slipping down her cheeks. She whispered to the babies, "She used to sing this to us. She said no storm could last forever." Her small voice trembled, cracking under the weight of remembrance. For a moment she closed her eyes and let the song carry her back, her mother's arms strong and warm, her father's laugh in the background. But the memory dissolved into the sterile brightness of the penthouse, and her chest hollowed with loss. James appeared quietly in the doorway, listening. The song pierced him, not because he recognized the melody but because of the rawness in her voice. He stepped inside, his movements deliberate, careful not to break the fragile cocoon she had wrapped around herself and the twins. When she finally noticed him, she quickly wiped her eyes, embarrassed by the vulnerability. He crouched near the bed, his voice soft. "I heard you sing your mother's song." Lily nodded, clutching Noah closer. "She sang it every night. She said it meant we were safe." James's throat tightened. He reached out, adjusting the blanket around Levi, his hand steady. "She was right, and now it's my turn to make sure you're safe." Lily looked at him with wide eyes, searching for deception. Adults had lied before. Promises had shattered before. She whispered, "They'll come back. They always do." James met her gaze with quiet certainty. "Let them try. They won't win. Not this time." Down in the study, Navarro's files still lay open, the photographs stark against the polished wood. James returned after leaving Lily with the twins, his eyes dark with determination. He leaned against the desk, fists pressing into the surface. "If they killed her parents, they'll stop at nothing," he muttered. Navarro crossed her arms, her tone measured. "That's why we move carefully. We gather evidence. We build the case. And when it's ready, we strike so they can't slip away." James nodded slowly, but in his chest burned a vow he didn't voice. He would protect Lily not just through courts and papers, but with every resource at his disposal. That evening, Lily asked timidly if she could sit by the window. James nodded, pulling a chair closer so she could see the skyline glowing with city lights. She held Noah in her lap and sang again, quieter now, the lullaby more like a whisper. James stood behind her, hands clasped, the sound of her fragile voice blending with the hum of the city. He thought of his wife, of the kindness she had carried like a shield. He thought of the crash photos, of greed turning to murder, and he swore silently that these children would never again be pawns in someone else's cruelty. The revelation of sabotage had shifted everything. No longer was this a simple matter of custody. It was a battle against people who had already crossed every line. For Lily, the lullaby was a thread to her lost mother, proof that love once surrounded her. For James, it was a reminder of what must be protected at all costs. The storm was no longer at the door. It was inside the story itself, demanding courage neither could turn away from. The marble halls of Pasadena Family Court echoed with a cold weight that morning, sunlight streaming through tall windows and slicing shadows across the floor. James Whitaker walked steadily toward the courtroom doors, Lily close beside him, her hand clutching his sleeve, while Noah and Levi remained with a court-appointed nurse in the waiting area. Evan and Caleb followed silently, their usual skepticism dimmed by the gravity of what was about to unfold. Detective Sarah Navarro carried a thick folder pressed against her chest, her stride purposeful, her expression sharp with focus. For Lily, every step felt heavier than her small frame could bear, but she did not falter. She had dreamed of this moment and dreaded it too, the chance to speak truth against the very voices that had silenced her for months. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs, wooden benches filled with curious onlookers and stern officials. At the front, Judge Elena Vargas adjusted her glasses and reviewed the documents stacked before her. The bailiff called the room to order, and silence fell like a curtain. Leonard Price rose immediately, his suit pressed to perfection, his eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a predator circling prey. He gestured broadly as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, what we have here is a case of abduction disguised as charity. My clients, Robert Klein and Vivian Holt, rightful guardians of these children, have been deprived of their legal rights by a man who saw fit to snatch them from their care without consent or process." His voice rang with confidence, a performance polished from years of bending truth into spectacle. Robert and Vivian sat behind him, their faces arranged into masks of outrage, though Vivian's smirk slipped every so often when she thought no one was watching. James remained seated, calm but alert, his gaze steady on the judge. Sarah leaned close, whispering, "Let him dig his hole." The judge nodded toward James's side. "Mr. Whitaker, how do you respond to these accusations?" James stood, his voice clear, deliberate, each word carrying weight. "I did not abduct anyone, Your Honor. I intervened when I witnessed an 8-year-old child being thrown onto the street for giving her sick brothers a spoonful of milk. I intervened because neighbors turned away and guardians mocked her suffering. I acted because decency demanded it." Price scoffed theatrically, colorful words but unsubstantiated. "The child is confused and emotional. She will say anything to please her rescuer. My clients have provided food, shelter, and care since the tragic loss of her parent. This entire spectacle is nothing more than a wealthy man's misguided attempt to play savior." He turned sharply, gesturing to the judge. "Allow me to call the child to the stand." Lily's stomach lurched, but James squeezed her hand gently before she stepped forward. The courtroom seemed to grow taller as she climbed onto the witness chair, her legs too short to touch the ground. She folded her hands in her lap, eyes darting nervously until Judge Vargas leaned forward, her tone softer. "Do you understand why you're here, Lily?" The girl nodded. "Yes, ma'am. To tell the truth." Vargas nodded. "That's right, and that's all you need to do." Price approached with a calculated smile, lowering his tone as if speaking to a fragile bird. "Lily, your uncle and aunt gave you a home after your parents' accident, didn't?" Lily's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "They gave me a place, but not a home." Price's smile faltered briefly before he pressed on. "They fed you, clothed you, and cared for your brothers. Isn't that true?" Lily's eyes filled but did not break. "They fed us when it suited them. Sometimes we went hungry. They clothed us in what no one else wanted. They cared more for money than for us." Whispers rippled across the courtroom. Price straightened, irritation flashing in his eye. "And this story about being thrown out exaggerated, isn't it? Children imagine things." Lily sat taller, her voice unwavering now. "I don't imagine the pavement burning my feet. I don't imagine neighbors shutting their door. I don't imagine my uncle taking the bottle from my hand and throwing me outside while my brothers cried. That happened." Her words sliced through the silence, her small voice carrying a force even Price could not diminish. Sarah rose smooth. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit evidence." Judge Vargas gestured for her to proceed. Sarah placed photographs on the stand, blown-up images of brake lines severed cleanly, grooves unmistakable. "These are from the crash that killed Daniel and Claire Harper." Initial reports listed mechanical failure, but forensic review proved sabotage. The cuts were deliberate. Gasps filled the room. Vivian shifted uncomfortably, and Robert's jaw tightened. Sarah continued, her tone sharp. "Further, here are records of falsified medical claims submitted under the children's names. Vivian Holt attempted to file prescriptions never purchased, drawing funds from the estate under false pretenses." Judge Vargas's eyes narrowed. "Do you have proof these falsifications tied directly to Mrs. Holt?" Sarah nodded, sliding signed forms across. "Handwriting matches, signatures confirmed. It's fraud layered over neglect." The judge scanned the pages, her expression darkening. Price scrambled, his confidence faltering. "Objection, Your Honor. Circumstantial at best." But Vargas cut him off. "Overruled. The evidence is admissible." The gavel's sharp crack silenced the room. Price's voice wavered as he tried to redirect, but the momentum had shifted. James stood again, his gaze sweeping the room. This case is not about me, nor about wealth. It is about children robbed of parents through violence and nearly robbed again by those meant to protect them. I did what any human should do when faced with cruelty. Lily looked at him, her eyes glistening but steady, and for the first time in months she felt the weight of truth leaning her way. She whispered softly to herself, echoing her mother's lullaby, "No storm lasts forever." Judge Vargas removed her glasses and folded her hand. The room held its breath. Given the testimony, the presented evidence, and the clear pattern of neglect and potential criminal activity, this court grants temporary custody of Lily, Noah, and Levi Harper to James Whitaker. Furthermore, a formal investigation will proceed regarding Miss Klein and Miss Holt. The gavel struck. Court is adjourned. The words crashed through Lily like sunlight breaking storm clouds. Relief flooded her chest. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe safety might hold. Robert cursed under his breath. Vivian's face contorted with fury, while Leonard Price snapped his briefcase shut with a defeated scowl. James exhaled deeply, tension easing, though his determination remained unbroken. He looked at Lily and gave a small nod, a promise renewed without words. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah placed a hand on James's shoulder. "This isn't over, but today they lost ground." James nodded, "And we gained something stronger than ground. We gained truth." Evan and Caleb stood quietly nearby, no longer objecting, their eyes fixed on the small girl who had just stood against giants and spoken with more courage than many adults could muster. Lily walked back toward James, her steps lighter, her heart still racing, but with something new, hope. She reached up, slipping her hand into his, and for the first time she whispered, "Thank you." The storm had not ended, but the tide had shifted, and for Lily Harper, the courtroom's decision was more than a ruling. It was the beginning of a life reclaimed. The penthouse felt different after the trial. No longer just a fortress of glass and stone perched above Pasadena, but a place where laughter began to replace silence. Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug. A box of crayons spilled across the floor, paper spread before her. Noah lay nearby, his tiny fists opening and closing as he gurgled, while Levi dozed softly against a pillow. Sunlight poured through the wide windows, spilling warmth across the room, as if the city itself had softened for them. She picked up a blue crayon, dragging careful lines across the page. In the center, she drew a tall figure with silver hair, his hand holding that of a small girl. Beside them, she added two younger shapes, rounded heads marked with curls for the twins. Then two more figures, Evan and Caleb, taller, less defined but part of the scene nonetheless. The colors bled into each other, imperfect but alive. For the first time, her drawing showed not just who she had lost, but who remained. James walked in quietly, pausing as he noticed the picture. His heart tightened at the crude but powerful sketch, the way she had placed herself in the center of a circle she had once believed broken. He didn't interrupt, only watched her brow furrow in concentration as she filled the page with bold strokes. Evan and Caleb entered from the kitchen carrying bottles of formula, the faint scent of warmed milk clinging to their hands. Evan bent down awkwardly, holding one bottle out. "Here," he muttered. Lily glanced up cautiously, then reached out and accepted it. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, a fragile acknowledgement that trust could be built one act at a time. Caleb crouched by Noah, tickling his tiny palm until the baby's hand gripped his finger. His expression softened in surprise, as if the connection startled him more than he expected. A knock at the door drew attention. James opened it to find a woman from DCFS, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, eyes scanning the room with professional precision. She introduced herself politely and stepped inside. Lily stiffened, her arms tightening around Levi as though preparing for him to be taken away again. James noticed instantly and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "She's only here to make sure you're safe," he explained softly. The worker smiled gently, crouching to Lily's level. "I just want to see how you're doing, sweetheart." Lily studied her carefully, then nodded, still wary but calmer under James's watchful gaze. The worker inspected the nursery. James had prepared with Evan and Caleb's reluctant but now genuine help. Shelves lined with formula, diapers stacked neatly, soft blankets folded by the window. Noah cooed happily in his crib, reaching for a toy mobile that spun above him. Levi stirred in Lily's arms, his cries quieting as she rocked him gently. The worker noted everything down, her tone approved. "They look healthy, cared for, safe. This is a good environment for them." Relief spread across James's chest. He thanked her, though words felt inadequate against the quiet triumph of knowing the children would not be ripped away again. As evening fell, the penthouse glowed with warm lamplight instead of sterile brightness. James sat with a book open but unread, his gaze fixed on Lily sprawled on the floor with crayons scattered around her. Evan and Caleb hovered nearby, one helping her sharpen a broken crayon, the other lifting Noah into his arms, and laughing nervously when the baby's small hand grabbed at his shirt. Their earlier resistance had melted into something unexpected, responsibility that didn't feel like a weight but like belonging. Lily held up her finished drawing shyly. "This is us," she whispered. The paper showed the family she had imagined into being. James tall and steady, the twins smiling, Evan and Caleb standing beside them, herself in the middle holding everyone's hand. James felt tears sting his eyes as he took the drawing, treating it as though it were as precious as any contract or invention he had ever signed. "It's perfect," he said simply, because anything more would have cracked his voice. Later, when the twins were settled and the city lights blinked beyond the windows, Lily sat by James on the sofa. She leaned against him cautiously at first, then fully exhaustion pulling her small frame into his side. Her whisper floated into the quiet. "I feel safe." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "That's all I wanted for you." She tilted her head up. "Do you think we can stay forever?" His throat tightened, but he placed a gentle hand on her hair. "As long as it takes, and longer. If I can." Evan watched from across the room, his earlier doubts softened into admiration. Caleb nudged him lightly, muttering, "Guess you were wrong." Maybe father knew exactly what he was doing. Evan gave a small shrug, but his smile betrayed agreement. The family's rhythm began to settle. Meals were shared around the large table where once only silence had sat. Bottles were warmed while stories were told. Lily's laughter, shy at first, began to bubble freely. When Caleb made silly faces at Noah, or when Evan pretended to misplace crayons, only to pull them from behind her ear. Evenings ended with James reading aloud from old books, his voice steady as Lily drifted towards sleep. The twins nestled close. The penthouse was no longer echoing marble and glass, but filled with the sound of life, fragile yet determined. On the final night before the court's next review, Lily taped her drawing to the refrigerator. She smoothed the corners with care, stepping back to admire it. James joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, eyes shining with something more than gratitude. "Belong?" He asked softly, "What's one way you can make someone feel like they belong today?" She thought for a moment, then pointed at the drawing. "Maybe by making sure they're never left out of the picture." The answer settled over James like sunlight. He smiled, bending to kiss the top of her head. The storm had passed, the wounds not gone but healing, the pieces of a broken family remade into something new. They had been thrown together by cruelty but bound in now by choice, by trust, by the simple acts of care that had rebuilt what neglect tried to destroy. And as the city lights flickered outside, the penthouse no longer felt like a monument to wealth or grief. It felt like home. Morning lights spilled into the penthouse kitchen, stretching golden fingers across marble counters and polished steel. The scent of pancakes and syrup lingered in the air, mingling with the laughter of children that once seemed impossible in these walls. Lily sat at the table, her hair tangled from sleep, her eyes bright as she cut pieces of pancake carefully for Noah and Levi, who giggled in their high chairs. The clatter of forks, the squeals of the twins, and the soft hum of conversation created a rhythm that felt like life restored. Evan stood at the stove, pretending frustration as one pancake fell apart in the pan, while Caleb teased him from across the room, lifting his phone to capture the disaster. James leaned back in his chair, a quiet smile tugging at his mouth as he watched the scene unfold. For the first time in years, his home carried warmth not from its design or location, but from the people within it. Lily glanced up at James, her smile small but certain. She no longer flinched at sudden sounds or lowered her gaze when spoken to. Her laughter rang freely, carrying a tone her mother once nurtured in lullabies. She fed Levi a spoonful of fruit mash, wiping his chin with a napkin, and whispered softly, "No storm lasts forever." James heard the words and felt his chest tighten. His wife had once believed the same, had carried the conviction that kindness could outlive cruelty. He saw her reflection now in this girl's resilience, in the way she turned survival into hope. The ache of loss did not vanish, but for the first time he understood that grief and joy could live side by side without destroying each other. When the plates were cleared and the twins dozed in their high chairs, James carried a cup of coffee to the window. Pasadena stretched beneath him, the city buzzing with endless stories of struggle and triumph. He thought of the day he had stopped his car, of how easily he could have looked away, how many others had chosen to look away. That moment, That single choice had rewritten everything. He turned back toward the table where Lily now sketched on scrap paper with Evan and Caleb leaning over her shoulders, guiding her lines with teasing commentary. A crayon family bloomed again under her small hands. But this time the colors were brighter, bolder, drawn with confidence instead of hesitation. James closed his eyes briefly, hearing his late wife's voice in memory. Kindness is strength, she had said. One act can ripple further than you'll ever see. He had doubted that truth once, but now it lived in every corner of this penthouse, in every laugh that spilled across the breakfast table. He opened his eyes and knew it was time not only to protect this family but to carry the lesson outward, to remind others that compassion is never wasted. Because what began with a spoonful of milk had become more than survival. It had become a story of belonging, a reminder that the smallest acts of courage can ignite change. It was not wealth that saved Lily. It was a pause, a moment of attention, a refusal to keep walking. And that power does not belong only to men with cars or houses of glass. It belongs to everyone willing to stop, to listen, to see. So I turn to you now. If you saw Lily on the street, would you stop? If you heard a child cry out in need, would you turn away? Or would you let your steps slow long enough to offer help? Think of the moments when a stranger's kindness surprised you, when a hand reached for you at the exact second you thought you might fall. Think of how little it takes to shift the weight of another's world. A spoon of milk, a word of comfort, a jacket draped across small shoulders. These gestures may seem small, but to the one receiving them, they mean everything. Share a story of kindness you've seen or done. Remind others that humanity is strongest when it chooses to notice. Tag a friend who inspires you, whose compassion has lifted you in silent ways. Suggest a resource, a shelter, a charity that fights for children like Lily. Because somewhere right now, another child is standing on a scorching street waiting for someone to see her. Do not underestimate the power of what you carry. Your small act could be their spoonful of milk.